the scene this weekend in Dimona, Israel. An incoming Iranian ballistic missile leveling a one-story building. 30 people were taken to a hospital, according to Israel's emergency response service. They said now take a look at this: an Israeli strike on a bridge in southern Lebanon. The bridge was in the town of Tyre. Israel's defense minister said that Hezbollah, which is the Iranian-backed militia, was using it to move fighters and weapons into the southern part of the country. This video was released today by U.S. Central Command, saying it showed its forces continue to aggressively strike Iranian military targets with precision munitions. Those were their words. Over the weekend, President Trump suddenly issued an ultimatum on social media, threatening Iran with a deadline that would have passed just about 30 minutes ago. Here's what he posted on Saturday at 7:44 p.m. Quote, "If Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first." Iran's military responded on Sunday that if his threats regarding Iran's power plants are carried out, the Strait of Hormuz will be completely closed, and that all Israeli energy and communications infrastructure will be targeted, as well as, quote, similar companies in the region with U.S. shareholders. Then this morning, the president posted this, quote, "I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have had, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East." He went on to say, quote, "I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions." For its part, Iran denied such talks had happened, and the Speaker of Iran's parliament even borrowed a page from the president's own playbook, calling it fake news. This was President Trump's response.
Mr. President, Iran's foreign ministry says you're not telling the truth when it comes to productive conversations to end the war.
They're going to have to get themselves better public relations people. We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other. But we've had very strong talks. Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner had them. They went, I would say, perfectly. I would say that if they carry through with that, it'll end that problem, that conflict. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
CNN is now reporting that multiple countries are actively working to mediate a deal between the U.S. and Iran as the impacts of the war reverberate across the world. That's according to 5 sources familiar with the matter. For more on that, I'm joined by CNN senior White House correspondent Kristen Holmes. So is it clear how and why President Trump went from threatening attacks on Iranian power plants, which traditionally are viewed as kind of not regular targets because they often have civilian use, to being bullish on supposed negotiations?
Well, a couple of things that we know, Anderson. As you just mentioned, the Gulf allies had told the United States that any kind of targeting of civilian power sites could lead to disastrous escalation when it came to Iran. I will also note that this announcement that President Trump made came 2 hours before the U.S. markets opened, something he watches very closely, and caused those markets to rally Wall Street. So those are the things we're keeping in mind here. Now, there are still a lot of questions as to what these talks actually look like. You have, on the one hand, Iran saying that they're not involved in any kind of communications, and President Trump won't say who it is that the United States is talking to, who Witkoff or Kushner is having these conversations with, only to say that it was not the new supreme leader, but somebody they believe to be in charge. However, one proposal has a meeting later this week, potentially even including Vice President J.D. Vance, who up until now has not really been actively involved in any of these negotiations, though he did spend today on the phone with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel talking about a potential Iran agreement. One thing to note, we just heard President Trump talking about this, was this 15-point proposal. President Trump called it points of agreement. Our sources have said this was more of a proposal that the United States had sent to Iran through Pakistan of expectations. it is unclear to any of the sources that we spoke to whether or not they had actually agreed to anything on this proposal. In fact, one source saying that it would be nearly impossible for Iran to agree to these 15 points. Another source saying that this proposal looked an awful lot like what we saw months ago when these talks kind of fell off between the United States and Iran.
Kristen, thanks very much, Kristen Holmes. I want to get perspective now from Ambassador Wendy Sherman. She's the former Deputy Secretary of State and led the team that negotiated the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, and also Brett McGurk, who served as a senior advisor for the last 4 presidents and is now our CNN Global Affairs analyst. Ambassador Sherman, what do you make of the conflicting reports coming out of Tehran and Washington about whether there has been any back-channeling going on? I don't know if there's a quibbling over direct ones or through intermediaries. What do you think is likely going on?
Well, I have no doubt that there are a number of countries, Pakistan being one of them, Egypt, Turkey, others, that are trying to knit together some kind of an agreement to have a negotiation. Pakistan represents the interests of Iran in Washington, D.C., just as Switzerland represents us in Tehran, though they've been kicked out recently. But at any rate, I'm sure there have been discussions, but the president clearly thinks you do negotiations by press release or by tweet. That's not how negotiations are done. They can't be done as a drive-by. This is very serious. This is war. I do hope that there are talks that take place. I don't think there's any chance at all that 15 points of agreement have come to pass at this point. The very most one could get in 5 days are very, very broad parameters. This is a highly technical negotiation, and one of the things we've seen time and time again is that this administration doesn't really recognize expertise or respect expertise, and they're going to need some people at the table, even if it's Vice President Vance, who actually know what they're talking about.
Brett, how do you interpret this 5-day delay to what President Trump announced on his threat to attack power plants? And do you think that's a real threat?
Yeah, Anderson, I would love to be proven wrong. Well, I've been saying for the past month or so on your program that there's really no Venezuela model here when it comes to Iran. You're very unlikely to have someone emerge able to do a deal with us, as happened in Venezuela with Delcy Rodriguez. I still hold that assumption. I just do not see a path here. As Wendy said, a lot of intermediaries are coming in. Sometimes when you deal with mediators, Anderson, they will, and Wendy's dealt with this, they want to bring the two sides together. So they'll put a little spin on what they might be hearing from somebody in Iran. So there might be some hope. We'll see. But bottom line, to get to your point, I don't really see the opening for diplomacy right now. That's just my assessment. And that leads to back to what we were talking about last week in the Strait of Hormuz. Because what also is happening this week, as your lead-in to this segment showed, the military campaign is ongoing at a pace. We're moving more forces into the region. And the president here is also buying some time for that to play out. So by the weekend or so, we might be in position. He might have some more options. But even there, Anderson, that is a very difficult strategic equation. Opening up that Strait of Hormuz with military force, it's not just the military match. It's giving confidence to shippers and everything we've talked about. So we're really in a predicament. And I think this week, buying some time, getting forces into place, seeing if diplomacy can be open. But I still come back to where I've been, Anderson. This has a ways to go.
Ambassador, in terms of opening up the strait, I mean, if it's true that there are all these small vessels that can lay mines, that can attack ships, what confidence can the U.S. have that they can open it up unless there are, I don't know, I mean, what would it require? Would it require actual forces on the ground along, on some island nearby, along the coastal regions? What would it take?
I think all of the above, Anderson. Clearly, our really superb military has degraded some of the forces along the coast that Iran has put in place. But nonetheless, as you point out, small boats can lay mines. We believe some mines have been laid. It would take quite an effort by the United States, and it's not an effort that gets done in a day or a week or a month. One would have to continue to be a presence to make sure that the strait stayed open. So this is very tough. I think one other thing that's really important for viewers to understand, because this war has been waged in the way it has, twice when negotiations were underway, only to be faced with an assault from the United States and from Israel, Iran has become an even more radical, hard line administration. And any individual, as Brett has pointed out, who might sit down with Americans or through mediators with Americans is going to be tougher, more dug in, and very unlikely to agree to all of the things that the president has said he wants. I agree with Brett, this may be a stall tactic until we get our military in place, but if that is in fact what is going on here, the United States of America has to be in for a very long siege, and the president will not be able to continue to manipulate markets on every Saturday and every Monday morning.
Brett, do you agree with that? That this is, this is still, there's no end in sight right now.
I don't see it. So when it started, it was about a 4 to 6 week military campaign. By that estimate, we're in week 4. So maybe in a couple weeks, the military objectives will be met. But no, Anderson, your question, to get the Strait open, that's going to take a long time.
Yeah, Brett McGurk, Wendy Sherman, thank you. U.S. forces still hitting targets, as the president says. Discussions are underway, which Iran denies publicly, and now sources say multiple countries are working behind the scenes to mediate the deal. Up next, we'll see what signals America's allies may be looking for.